Now, a year on from what was billed as the biggest overhaul of the Scottish Labour Party in living memory, what has changed? A review by Jim Murphy, the Shadow Defence Secretary, was designed to help Scottish Labour recover from its huge defeat in the 2011 Scottish election. Speaking on this programme last year, just as the review was getting underway, Jim Murphy said the party needed to reconnect with voters.
It isn't just about our internal workings, it's about how we face the public, how we relate to the public, how we listen to the public, how we form policy, and how we make sure the Labour Party in Scotland remains a party that's connected to people's worries and fears and hopes for the future.
Well, what has changed? Let's speak to the political commentator, Gerry Hassan, and Campbell Gunn, who's the political editor of the Sunday Post. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
So, the biggest change in the party's history, Gerry Hassan, we were told? Has it made any difference?
Well, it has made a difference. It's lots of these things. It's always, the devil's in the details, about nuance, but it's not the biggest change. It did create a post, Scottish Labour leader, that hadn't existed before. So Joanne Lamont is that uncontested, unchallenged. There's not lots of backbiting and manoeuvring going on. It did devolve some area of policy making to the Scottish Labour Party. It did create a new party headquarters in Edinburgh, but it's not really shifted anything. There's not really fire in their belly. There's not really a mission and a purpose about what they're about. There's not really, to use the extract earlier, there's not really the cause of Scottish Labour is kind of missing.
There's no backbiting, Gerry Hassan says, in terms of the leadership in Scotland, Campbell Gunn.
No, obviously, but it's the organisational things that are the problem. There's this tension between John Smith House in Glasgow and the MSPs in Edinburgh. Yes, and obviously, and the recent suspension of the Labour Party's press officer in John Smith House is a symptom of that. There's just this power struggle between who's in charge. Actually, John Smith House tends to still work for Scottish Labour MPs rather than MSPs. Someone at the weekend said that the priorities for John Smith House are Scottish MPs, then Glasgow City Council, and finally Scottish MSPs.
Was the structure ever really clear? Because if you look at Margaret Curran, for instance, Shadow Scottish Secretary, she works to Ed Miliband in London, but of course is supposedly under the auspices of Joanne Lamont as Scottish Labour leader. The structure, it seems, was set up for conflict.
Yes, it does seem that way because Joanne Lamont has actually been quite a good Labour leader, surprised a lot of people by being very effective, but I think she still has a problem with John Smith House working more or less autonomously.
But if you look more outwardly, Gerry Hassan, we heard from Jim Murphy there a year ago saying that this restructuring was about reconnecting with voters and about how the party makes policy. Now, obviously, we're not that far out from the last election in terms of policy, etc., but has Labour been able to reconnect with the voters?
I don't think so. I think there's so many challenges. Firstly, the Scottish Labour Party doesn't quite exist. It's not this fiction that some of, say, Cybernat say, but the review didn't. This is still not an autonomous Scottish Labour Party. It still only does policy in devolved areas. So they've got stuck in a trap where, in the devolution years, how they did policy was ministers did it and civil servants did it, and so the party was either viewed as an obstacle often or an irrelevance or something to be challenged. And so subsequently, when they've lost ministers and civil servants and all that support system, they don't quite know how to do policy. They don't see the party as a resource, they don't see the trade union movement as a resource. So where does policy come? And they kind of don't know how to do that. And I think they need to think about how to get a couple of big hits, how to speak different on policy in a way that actually people are going to take notice of, because doing policy and then getting noticed, given the political environment, is going to be a big challenge.
There was a suggestion after the 2007 win by the SNP, Campbell Gunn, that Labour were just happy to wait for a few years until Scotland fell out of love with the SNP, if I can put it that way. That clearly didn't happen in 2011. There's a suggestion in one newspaper again today that is still the thinking within the Labour Party.
Yes, it's sometimes difficult for the Labour Party to change its ways. The problem they have, Gerry was saying, they need a big hit, a big policy hit, but the problem they have is really that on major policy issues, there's not a lot between the SNP and Labour. The big dividing thing is just independence for Scotland, and unless they can come up with something, really remarkable, I don't see where they go in this. Again, the other thing is it's organisational, and the Labour Party's used to be the most organised party in the country, and perhaps that was due to, in the old days, a lot of the senior people in the Labour Party had learned their trade in the Communist Party, who knew how to organise things properly through the trade unions and the party itself.
But if the defining issue is independence, Gerry, you could argue that actually the coming debate might be good for the Labour Party in that case, because it actually highlights the difference between them and the SNP, and perhaps gives the voters more of an idea of what the choice is at the next election.
Well, it puts Labour on the side at the moment, let's stress at the moment, on the side of a winning majority coalition. But the problem Labour's got then, that its fixation with the SNP, with its enemy, and with a kind of caricatured view of the enemy, actually it prevents Labour from getting down to being, what is it about, what is it saying that's distinctive and different. So, for instance, Labour have taken, it's been 45 years since the SNP broke through the modern SNP in Hamilton. Labour have strangely yet to come to terms with it. I mean, it's 45 years, it's nearly, 2 generations. And what they're going into is the way they talk about the union. They're getting into the trap of talking about the union as an end in itself rather than a means to an end. Labour used to see the union as a way to bring about a fairer, better Scotland, to bring education, health, better lives for working people. And they're getting into a trap of talking about the union as an end, and that prevents them talking about other policy issues. And so the fact of winning the independence referendum may actually aid the cul-de-sac. Labour is not talking about kind of like the substantive, traditional Labour issues.
OK, gentlemen, for the moment, thank you very much indeed for your assessment. Gerry Hassan, political commentator, Campbell Gunn there of the Sunday Post.